Well, hello. This is Jeff Bush, the guy with a big smile, and the guy with a big head in the background. That's me, Austin Gardner, and we're here with you at Leadership with Vision. And kind of going right now, you didn't post that going live, and that's what didn't do any good to say it.
We're going live.
We're going live, and so if you are on here and you find somebody, please invite your other friends to be with us, and we'll be talking in just a few minutes about as you're getting that church started. And so we're really just kind of wasting a little bit of time to let people get on here with us. And we're going to start the Leadership with Vision podcast. So somebody just gave us a like.
Brady Van Winkle, I
Brady
think.
Van Winkle, glad you're here, Brady. Invite somebody, Brady. Put it out on your Facebook page for them to come on and be with us as we get started on the things you do when you first start your church. And Jeff, I'm fixing to hit the startup button.
Yes, sir.
And we will go to it. So here we are making our podcast. All right, welcome to Leadership with Vision. This is Austin Gardner and our co-host Jeff Bush. And we are here to talk to you today about starting your church and some of the things that go into starting your church. And so we talked the last time, and in fact, last week I wasn't here because I was in Guatemala, and I was preaching with Wayne Cooks in the church that Wayne Cook started 13 years ago with a guy named Mario Tunches, Tunchez, and had a great time. They run about 70 people. Wayne did a phenomenal job. Mario's doing a phenomenal job, and it was exciting to be there in Guatemala and see what God's doing. Today, Wayne's on his way back to the States. I'm not sure what time he'll be leaving, but he's on his way back. And so we didn't make any podcast last week, I don't think. Jeff, where were you last week?
I think in Blairsville.
Blairsville, Georgia. This is the traveling preaching machine, man. A little bit later today, Lord willing, I'm going to make another podcast with Jeff and Robert about the training center. And so you can spread the word. If Robert comes around, he's supposed to be here later today. We will talk about that, and we will deal with that. But today, our subject is what you do when you're starting that brand new church. And just let me remind you that I have spoken to you very specifically about when you start a church, you ought to be using young people. I said 15 to 25. Those are people who listen and you can train. But when you're in your public service, you want to be very careful to deal with adults. It has to be real real adult church. So you want to do real church. And we would like to have you be careful it's not a youth meeting. It's not a bunch of kids talking and you're not cool and casual and comfortable. You are preaching the gospel to families, to men and women and children, and you are cool and casual and comfortable. I'm not saying you're not those things, but that's not your primary goal or your primary focus. And so we deal mainly with adults. I'd like to thank those that are joining us. Who's joined us?
Justin Brown, Jonathan Anderson.
That's in Mexico. I don't know. Dustin's here in America. Who's that other person?
Trocan, he says he's in Liberia starting a church.
Well, praise the Lord, Trocan. We're glad to have you with us. And the Spanish pastor, my son-in-law, Jimmy. Good morning, Jimmy. He is a Spanish pastor here in our church. We're glad to have him. As we talk, invite all of you to give us some likes and some amens and hearts and all that junk, but also
shoot us some questions.
Do what?
Shoot us some questions.
Questions and comments, and we will keep you involved in the conversation. So we discussed the public services. In private, you're spending time with your young men. In private, you're spending time with your young men. In the public service, though, it's a church service for all ages, from the little ones all the way to the old ones, and you want to be careful to do that. Years ago, a friend of mine, Pastor Wayne Cofield, he was my pastor, but before that, I was pastoring a church that I'd started in another city, and he made the comment that I was an overgrown youth director, and I never hung out with the adults, and he said that hindered my church. And I do not know what just happened on the phone. We got a phone call, and I just told him I couldn't talk, and so I don't know. But if you messed up the thing, I'm very sorry for that. And I will try to get my wife to make a phone call and talk to them so that they won't bother us again. But anyway, here we are. And so continue with us if you will. We also discussed the way you should dress Look at how the successful people and leaders, especially, not because you need to dress that way as the American and as the person with a little more age and maturity and a blue passport, but as we're talking about these young people, 18 and 20 years old, you're going to put in leadership of people 60-year-olds. You want to try to help them have some appearance of being an adult, being someone who can be in leadership. So today, let's talk about what do you buy for the church. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, let me say very quickly, we're giving a little review. Maybe you can go back and listen, especially those that are joining us for the first time, to catch up to where we're at. But speaking about what we're going to buy for the church. So we'll start right off. Pastor, maybe somebody doesn't have a lot of money when they jump in. Most missionaries are going to have a lot of money. But when you do jump in, let's start out with some songbooks. Let's start out with some basic things. You're going to get the chairs, song sheets. You can get copies. You can pull something off the internet and do it. Something that you're going to repeat. And let me say the songs, you don't want to teach them a new song every service.
Oh, that is for sure.
You want to just keep singing over and over until they get that. Something simple. You want them to enjoy singing, and so some choruses, some songs, however you do it.
One of the things that's killing song services in America is the way people constantly sing the same. They sing new songs and hard to follow songs, and the people don't know them, and it becomes a spectator sport. And you never want your song service to be a spectator sport.
So it's not a bad idea to repeat something. We want to repeat it. We want to make this simple. We have to remember these guys are coming. Most people are coming from, they don't know the gospel or they just got saved or whatever it may be. And so we want to help them from all the way to the very ground. So when we start off, we're going to get some songbooks. We're going to get some chairs. We're going to get all the basics that you need for the starting of a church.
And basically, you want to get basic stuff that can be repeated when you're not there. Because if you spend a lot of money, for example, if you are in a country that can't afford a projector, but you're from America and you think projectors are just normal and commonplace, and you're going to buy a computer and a projector and a fancy sound system, and then the guys you're going to send out to start churches could never afford that, you have effectively made them look bad, and you have put them in a position that they won't be able to do that. So don't buy things and don't do things that are outside of their ability. I mean, I'm all the way down to flannel graphs. When Betty and I first went to Peru, we took a Betty Lucan flannel graph, which is a great resource. And but the problem was, and when we had one church, it was okay. But you got to get more than one, even in a growing church. You get a church running 100, 150, got several Sunday school classes. You're going to need more than one Betty Lucan thing. Like back then, it was like $200, $250, and so if one church needs 2 or 3, and you got 10 churches, it starts pricing itself out of what you can afford, and they probably. At that time, in the churches I worked in, they couldn't afford it. They may can in the church that you're in. And by the way, if they are financially able to do something, I say go for
it. Brady Van Winkle has a good question. He says, how much would you plan for and try to have saved up when you start your church so you can purchase the things that you need?
Well, that is Brady, that's a good question, but it is such a big question. Back in my day, I could start a church for $1,000. I think that's probably $5,000 now. What's it cost to buy 40 or 50 chairs, a table, a small podium, a sign, rent a small space that'll hold 40 or 50 people? What's that cost? Probably not an awful lot of money. But then when you say that, are you discussing buying a piece of property? Are you discussing all that other stuff? So I would say $5,000 is probably the minimum. Barely scrape by, get the smallest amount of things that you can. Buying chairs for $10 a piece, $400. Buying a sign, renting a small building. Our guys nowadays all rent buildings that would seat 200 or 300 people, and I never did that. So I'm not against it. I don't think it's sin. I just didn't have that kind of money to start the number of churches I wanted to. Jeff?
I would say, Brady, it's kind of like maybe kind of like marriage. It would be nice to have all the money saved up, but not everybody does. Just go ahead and do it. And, the ceremony and the wedding is not the biggest thing. It's what you do afterwards. And so you might have all the money. That would be great. but you might not have all the money. You might not have the best of equipment to go ahead and start. But once you start, and then get it rolling and get the things going the right way. And, it's not necessarily the start of the church, but how you're going to do once you get going. So, make a list, songbooks and projector, maybe baptistry, all the chairs and the lights, and pass out the flyers, get everything rolling. Have all those things. Think through them. Go ahead and write them down. Read some good books. Get thinking through some things. Talk to some people. But at the same time, you can start pretty much at any time. Whether it's in a garage, whether it's in the backyard, you can pretty much start a church anywhere, anytime.
You don't need a big building unless you're going to have a lot of people. And most of us are not going to have as many people as we'd like to think would show up. For example, I didn't have a baptistry, and the church I got saved in didn't have a baptistry, and most churches probably on the mission field, you can go to a river, you can go to a creek, you can go to the ocean, or you can build a baptistry. And we have several missionaries. The guys in South Africa have done a beautiful job of building them. I think Kevin Hall built the first one I saw like that, and he just built a baptistry. He'd be glad to tell you, I think, how to go about that. So you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on stuff that you might not necessarily need. Even down to offering plates, use wicker baskets. Down to the Lord's Supper stuff, you don't have to get the really fancy brass plates that they use in America. You want to do something that is reproducible. You want to do something that's reproducible. So I think that brings us to our next discussion point, and that is you are starting churches. Now, what is your attitude towards nationals? Go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Well, I would say we have to be very careful in a lot of aspects, but we'd be very surprised. A lot of missionaries, when they arrive to the field, they have a great love, and they've traveled around the United States on deputation saying,
telling everybody,
I love the people. And
I never met them.
Yeah, and we have to be very careful, because then you get over there, man, culture starts getting in, and they do things. They take advantage of you because you have more money. You're the American, or they make fun of you because you don't speak the language just like they do. And it becomes very... Boy, I mean, it even happens in the United States. Someone goes and leaves from the southeast, and they go up to Montana and start a church. It's a different culture. And then all of a sudden they say, those people out west, they need the gospel. And then all of a sudden those people out west, or wherever it may be, they start to mock. And boy, you get a hold of that and you say, you know what? These people here, they're like this. And all of a sudden you generalize everything. You have to be very careful about your attitude with the people that you're going to work with.
So do you believe that God can use them to start a church? Do you believe that God can put them in responsible places of leadership? Do you believe they can be trusted with preaching the gospel? Do you believe that they can give their money? Do you believe that they can lead their homes? Or do you believe that in some way of looking at it, they are subhuman? Do you in some way feel like they are not as good as Americans? And there is a definite attitude, lots of attitudes that sprinkle through Americans. An old one that they used to use is called paternalism. And that is, I'm the great white father, and I've arrived on the field, and these poor dumb little children are going to really need my help. They can't do anything on their own. They've got a messed up country, can't pay their bills, can't take care of their homes, and they are savages. They are sub-level. I'm reading a book right now, just a secular book called White Trash, and even many of the founding fathers of America felt that about many people here. And it was written in their books. And so you want to be careful. What's your attitude? Do you believe that a national can be trained to do the work? Are you going to be able to turn this over to a national? Do you believe that their way of worshiping, their way of dressing, their way of living, the houses they live in, can they be trusted with God's church?
Just because it's different does not make it wrong. The way they do things, when they eat, or how they eat, or what they eat, or the style, the culture, all about it, just because it's different does not make it wrong. Maybe you're the one who needs to change. You're on their field. You're on their turf. And so instead of, you have to be careful. I know of missionaries, they're good men, but they go to a country, but then they're still their ancestors or whatever from another country. And so they'll cheer for a sports team in the other country. And the people there, listen, dear friends, just because you put it on Facebook doesn't mean that everybody in that country can't see it. They can see it, and they get pretty mad, and they get pretty hurt. And all of a sudden, doors begin to close for you.
Yeah, when you write on Facebook and put a picture of their food and say, can you believe they eat this?
Yeah.
And you mock them and make fun of them, they read that and they know that. when you feel like that none of their men are worthy husbands, when you feel like that their ladies are sensual, carnal, wicked people, when you don't believe that they can arrive at being whatever God has for them to be, you are setting yourself up to fail. We're there to teach them how to have church, and we do not want them to be Americans.
Pastor, we had a girl come down with us when we first went to Argentina, and she's from a good church. She's a good girl, but after a while, she was supposed to stay with us for about 2 weeks to help us in the transition, help watch our kids, and ended up, there were some difficult times, and she said, I can't believe the way the people dress here. I could never come here as a missionary. I said, why is that? And she said, they dress horrible, and I mean, they listen to bad music. And I said, you know why we're here? I mean, she had this bubble mentality of, you know what? People are, it's just not like where I come from. Well, that's why you're there, dear brother. Be very careful about the attitude that you form about the people there.
Get out of the Baptist bubble, get out of the Christian cocoon, and remember that honestly, the way they're dressing is just a symptom. It's not the problem, and you're upset about something foolish. Can I just be honest? You're worried about what music they listen to, and you're worried about how they dress, when what you need to be worried about is, are they born again? Are they going to go to heaven when they die? And do they know the Lord Jesus? Have their sins been forgiven? And so, you're there to love them and help them towards that. Now, I think the biggest problem with the nationals is you're going to believe they can't do it as well as you can. And so you begin to develop an attitude that they will never. So missionaries go in the field and they end up sending another missionary to take their place when they go on furlough, because there would never be an be a national who could take over. And so mission boards even plan missionaries that can work as substitutes for missionaries that have to take a furlough. And they act like the furlough is a negative thing, and they act like the nationals can't do it, and so they're working out this situation because the missionary needs a break, and they're sending a missionary. That's not the way we would challenge you to think. We would challenge you to think, I have 4 years to get somebody ready that can take over this work and lead this work when I'm gone.
Amen. Our attitude is so important. I mean, be a driven person in the fact that you want to get it done. You've got a calendar. You've got things that need to be done. And then have the right heart about it. Have the right attitude about the people. God can use them. God wants to use them. You're going out there and finding, looking for these people and saying, I believe God can use them. So go out and find them. There are people there that can be the next, if we want to say, the next D.L. Moody, the next Spurgeon, the next Hudson Taylor. They're out there. But you've got to dig through and you've got to find those guys.
So here's the question. What do you do by yourself while you're on the mission field? You've got to be very careful that you are not doing everything. Your job is to hand off every job you can, every time you can, to put somebody else to doing a job. And so you don't do things alone. You want them to go with you to see how you do it, to follow your lead. They will learn. It is more caught than taught. So they're hanging out with you and they're learning how to do the work from you, and you're going to turn the work over to them.
Your goal, remember from the very beginning, and let me just say very quickly, you have to have, your motive has to be in the right spot. In other words, you love the people, but you're not there just for the people, just for your love for the people, better said. You're there because God sent you there. Of course you love the people, but the people are going to hurt you. The people are going to criticize you. The people are going to make fun of you. And so if you're only there for the people, you will walk out very soon and very frustrated, and missionaries get discouraged all the time. You are there because God sent you there. So you have to fuel your own fire. You have to jump in the Word of God. You have to be close to the Lord. You have to keep finding. And that's why we spend, as Jesus did, 80% of his time with 20% of the people, because if you're spending the time with everybody, boy, you hardly get anywhere. You're spending time with the leaders, because those are the ones who are going to take the ministry forward. You really love them. Fuel that fire and keep going. Have the right motives of why you're on the mission field.
Before I jump into what Brother Jeff just said, let me just say this. You don't hang on by your fingernails. You don't go down there and just say, I think I can make it till I get home on furlough. You are going to walk with God every day and know God. You're going to get something from the Word of God. You're going to get something. Your church services ought to be as good or better and as exciting as more exciting than anything in America. Fact is, for my children when they were young, coming back to America was a letdown because of the dead churches. They used to say to me, Dad, why are these churches so dead? Why aren't people excited about Jesus? Why aren't people getting saved? Why aren't more people at church? Why is it such a few old people in church? And so Brother Jeff said, you got to feed yourself, and that is exactly right. You might say to me, well, there are no women's fellowships. Start one. Amen. You might say to me, there's no men fellowships. Start one. You may say there are no pastors fellowships. Start one. That's your job. You're there to get things rolling and to have things going up there. Okay.
Well, we have a couple comments here, Pastor. Josh Hill says, I could listen to this all day, so much wisdom. Thank you for taking time to do this. And Josh, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Josh.
We appreciate that very much. Jonathan Anderson in Mexico says, I'd like to start another church soon with some of the men from our seminary. Should I start the church knowing that my guys are not ready this year? Is it wise to pastor 2 churches for a while before turning it over?
Well, I don't know if it's wise. I pastored a lot more than that. So I used to start churches. I used to pastor 3. I preached 3 times on Sunday morning, 3 times on Sunday evening, and I just ran between them. Now, if you're in Guatemala City, where I just was with Wayne Cook and Mario Tunjas, you're not going to do that. I mean, you just can't hardly move around that city. It's one of the most needy cities I've been to in the world, and it was just congested beyond 7 million people in the greater outside the metropolitan area, 15 churches, so it was very needy. But I would, yes, I would start with them as long as they met with me. I kept it as a mission, not as a church, so that I still had authority and leadership. And then I would give them a small amounts of work to do. I'd leave somebody pastoring with me in the main church, and then I'd have somebody else in the other church. And I would have staff meetings with all those guys that work with me, and we'd go over all the things that are going on. I would maybe not be at Sunday school at the one church and be at church at the other church. In other words, yes, there's a whole lot you can do, Jonathan. I think that's a great idea. You don't want to do it if they're not going to be ready by the time you leave. Like if you're planning a furlough and you say, I wouldn't have time to get them ready, I'd wait. But if you have time to get them ready, I would definitely do.
Thanks, Jonathan, for jumping in. And Jonathan, you're doing a great work in Mexico City.
Yeah, we are very proud of you.
Amen. And it's a blessing knowing you and being friends. Let me say this, Jonathan. As Pastor already mentioned, and we've mentioned this in the past, but just to run back over it, there's a difference between a church and a mission, or, you might think that that's just difference in words. But the truth is, when you can start something and still be in charge of it, be responsible for it, until you make that into a church, until you organize it and you turn it over, then it's still a mission. That means you're still responsible. Once you turn it over, you really don't have a right to walk back in and say, no, this is not the music we sing, or this is not how we preach. You guys need to work this out. But you should not turn it over until a man is totally ready. And so keep him under your wing, not to have control, but keep it under your wing so that you can make sure that man is totally ready. Paul said, not a novice, not somebody who's just, man, I had a desire and he jumped in. Desire's good. That's where we start, but that's not where we finish. So we keep on going. So jump in and start something and have the control over that and say, hey, you're going to preach, you're going to do this, but let's make sure you help them figure it out so that when they are at that age limit and they want to get married per se and they go out and they're ready for real life.
I just will temper this because I know some of you listening, he said totally ready. And some of you think that means he's got to be 80 years old and have 60 years experience and be perfect at everything he does. And I haven't even met a missionary or a pastor that's that way. And so totally ready by that, he means he's learned all the basics. He's already doing the ministry. You've already helped him. He's shown diligence and dedication. He is discipling people, training people, winning people. He has proved his weapons. And so that's what he means by totally ready. I know what he means, and I agree with him. But you listening are probably thinking, well, I don't know, brother. These guys aren't totally ready. Brother Jeff said totally ready. And I would say to you, maybe you're not totally ready. Wasn't that rough? Wasn't that rough? I know I'm not totally ready. I look at it and I say, look how many times I mess up. Look how many times I'm not doing things well in my own church. I don't preach as well as I should. I don't deal with his situations as well as I should. So when's a man totally ready in that sense? So just be careful with that.
I think we should all be careful how we're going to judge the other guys. I'm where I am because several people have helped me. and given me opportunities when I've done really dumb things. I remember when I was in language school, I invited a person. Man, I was so excited. I thought, this is awesome. I've been praying that God will give me some people that get saved and baptized. And I invited this couple, and I stood up, and actually, Pastor was in Peru, and he said, would you, introduce this family that's with you? Man, a mom and a dad and 2 kids. I've been working on them, and I was so excited. So I stood up and I said, this is Jose and Maria, or whatever their names were. This is so-and-so and so-and-so, and they're visiting us. And I said the name of the section of the area of town.
And you said what they did as a living.
Needless to say, they never came back.
Because saying what they did in that church sounded like he was insulting them. He did not mean it that way.
And I did so many mess ups and so many things. But the point is, I had other chances and other opportunities. I learned, and my mistakes were on his account. He let me do those things so that when I was ready, yeah, sure, I still fumbled, but you know what? God allowed me, gave me more chances. And so you want to do the same thing. So take these guys, Jonathan, and say, after they get done preaching, say, that was excellent. But let me say, be very careful how you say this. Don't point at anybody. Don't say this. Don't look. Correct them, lovingly, but help them. If not, they'll never get better. They're not just going to people don't naturally get better. You have to sit down and tell them, hey, buddy, this is in private.
Lovingly.
I want the best, but we got to work on this.
Lovingly, kindly, directly. Well, we have Philip Trask joining us from Sand Mountain Bible Camp. Hey, Brother Philip, we love you and so happy for you. Praying for Tracy and all that's going on there. And then we have Lori Basham, who's joined us from all the way over in Thailand. And what a privilege to have you with us, Lori. I don't know what time it must be over there. It is 10 o'clock. It must be 10 o'clock at night. And so glad to have you with us. Good evening to you. As good morning here. So the question next is, who do you spend time with? And so, you got a lot of people coming to your church, and you might wind up spending all your time with all these people. But the first question you ask is, are they headed to the ministry, or are they potentially headed to the ministry? Can I see them on a road? They might not have said it, but you feel like they're headed to the ministry, because that's who you want to spend time with. You want to spend, Jeff's already said it, 20% of your time with 80% of the people. So the majority of people don't get a lot of time, but the minority, the 20% get 80% of your time, and so you want to spend a lot of time with them, and you want to train them, because these guys are going to be Sunday school teachers, assistant pastors, missionaries, and you're spending time with them because you can see they're not ready. They're not even saying it, but you see it, and you're leading them that way.
I love the life of Joshua in the Old Testament, and he is known as the servant of Moses, and he's always walking around with Moses. And it says in one passage, I think chapter number 33, Exodus or so, they go up, and Moses leaves the men there, and Joshua goes up a little bit further, and then Moses goes all the way up to the very top. Well, when he comes down, it's him and Joshua, and he was by himself. He left everybody else. And at other times, Joshua's in charge of he's the leader of the whole army against Amalek. And at other times, he's one of the 12 men that's chosen. So anyway, he's done so many things. He's right beside Moses, helping Moses. And when it's time, when Joshua chapter number 1 comes, Moses is off the scene, God looks at Joshua and says, all right, it's your turn. Stand up and you're ready. But it wasn't a surprise. Joshua had been there the whole entire time serving Moses. And so you're going to leave the field one day by sickness, by death, by furlough, whatever it is. When it is, it shouldn't be a surprise who the guy is that's going to be in charge.
And don't wait till you die or retire. Start working towards that at the very beginning.
Give him opportunities. Let him be with you. Teach him. Let him have responsibility. Let him work up. He's the youth pastor. Now he's doing this. And so now the people respect him. Why do the people not respect some leaders and respect others? Well, the leaders they don't know, they don't respect because he hasn't gained their respect. But if somebody's been with you the whole time, he just continues on. The people are like, well, yeah, obviously he was the assistant. He was the youth pastor. He was the one who visited us when pastor was around. And it's just a natural flow of how he goes into ministry.
Elisha poured water on the hands of Elijah and will end up doing twice as many miracles. So good point. Work with them and head them that way. So the next thing that we have in our list to discuss with you is when you should think about splitting your church or leaving.
You might want to explain splitting for some of our brethren.
When we say splitting, we don't mean it in the American way. The American way is you never let a guy get on his own, and so he ends up climbing up the ranks, getting people liking him, and splitting your church. We're not talking about that. But there will come a time that you may send a bunch of your people over to start another church. Or like Jonathan Anderson was talking about, you might go start another church in a different place, and that would be a fantastic thing to be able to do. And so you're going to take some of your people and start more churches. We ought to be church planners. Every church in America ought to be thinking about, how can we start more churches? How can we train people to go out and do that? And so when should you do that? Well, your first question is, do you have a leader trained?
Well, Wayne Cofield is joining us, and I believe he's getting on the plane in just a little bit. Head back to the States. Glad you're. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Wayne Cook. My bad, Brother Wayne.
I think is he not headed maybe over? No, that's Tony Howitt's headed to South Africa. Maybe I don't know if Brother Wayne's going. Brother Wayne was our pastor.
Amen.
Both of our pastors, so we love him and we love Whitfield Baptist Church. And Brother Wayne, we are very glad you are on today, and thank you for all you've done over all the years to help so many missionaries and to start so many churches, and what a blessing you've been. So you are starting more churches. Now, I put in our notes here, should I be bothered that people are loyal to the national? Well, of course not. You know, that's your goal, and it hurts a little bit. I had a guy one time that came down and worked with us, and he went to another city, and he called me one day and said, the people don't like me near as much as they like him. I said, well, great. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no way, it's crazy. I want them to love me. But they're going out in the early morning, going for a walk with him. And they're going to the gym with him, and they're spending time with him, and he's their friend. And they just look at me as a missionary. But what's your purpose? Your purpose is to be there to get somebody else to be a success.
You remember, you're not a success unless there is a successor. So you want to turn this over. So eventually they will. You know, it would be like a dad and his daughter. You know, the daughter loves her dad.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Jeff. Your daughter's 15.
Okay, let's change analogies and let's use something else.
Got her learner's permit ready?
You know what? I totally want to switch to another analogy.
And maybe some guys think she's cute.
Okay, anyway.
And maybe she's going to start switching her loyalty from you.
Okay, I love my pastor, but he's off topic.
See, he doesn't like it when he gets close to home.
Okay, anyway, we're talking about missions.
Guys, give me some claps for that one.
Yeah, back off all of y'all. So there will be a switch. There will be a change.
Yes, there will be.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
And you have like 25 daughters, don't you?
Yeah, pretty close.
Let's see, I think you have 4 daughters.
Yes, sir.
You don't mind your son getting a wife.
Yep.
Well, those girls are going to be loved and dump you, buddy.
Back off all y'all with all the thumbs up for that point.
Keep it coming, guys. I love it. Listen, Jeff is just getting angrier with me. He cannot wait to hang up so he can shoot me.
But the truth is, there will be a moving, we could say, of loyalty. And that's natural. And on the mission field, we want that. You know, it's amazing things can happen when we're not worried about who gets the credit. And so giving the other guy, in fact, even pushing that next man, he gets the credit, and he says, you know, you say in public and in private, praise the guy and say, you know, he's doing a great job. This is what's happening. That's a good thing. A missionary, don't steal, don't be a ball hog with all the credit. And I think it was in Good to Great, the book, it said, the difference between a good leader and a great leader. A good leader looks into the mirror and sees himself and says, man, I did awesome. This is great. A great leader looks through the window and sees the people on the other side and said, you know what? It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you guys. You guys did excellent. And so we want to give the missionary, give the other guy the credit, help him, build him, make him a better person.
I am going to remind Jeff of every bit of this.
Do we still have to go there?
As somebody calls and wants to date Lydia, I'm going to say you need to talk positively about the guy. You need to love the guy. You need to talk privately good about him in public. Amen.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time today. I sure appreciate you joining us.
Well, before we close down, any questions or comments? We've been going about 33 minutes on the podcast. We will do another one right after this so that the guys will be ready. You know, they're programmed out and they come out on worldevangelism.net and they come out on iTunes. Of course, they're here on Facebook. But before we do, maybe you have some questions or comments or things you'd like to discuss real quickly about what you do while you're starting the church. So if you'll throw the questions up, we'll talk about that. While I wait to see if you're going to ask any questions, I want to get Jeff to remind you about the summit?
Well, end of the year, December 29th, 30th, 31st. It's the last Thursday, Friday, Saturday of the year. We'll be holding the Our Generation Summit. And here in the Atlanta area, specifically Buford at Lake Lanier Islands, it's going to be an excellent opportunity. Missionaries from all over. We'll have several veterans coming, guys on deputation. Students have a wonderful time. Well, they'll be doing the teaching, the preaching, the breakout sessions. It's going to be a great time. We already have a lot of people that have registered, and I would encourage you, jump online, visionmissions.com, and you can /events. You can look at the summit, who's going to be teaching, who's going to be preaching, what's going on. And man, I would encourage you, this is going to be a very, very good time to talk about world evangelism.
Well, I was on yesterday with talking to Paul Talby in Nepal, and Friday night, which, right now it is Friday morning over there for him. So tonight, he is going to have an event where he's going to show a film, I think, Facing the Giants, and he's invited people from all over the community to come and be with him. And so you need to pray. He put it on Facebook and got a lot of people that were saying pretty ugly thing. I think he had 500 people that liked it, 50-something people that said they might come, but about 10 people had really, one guy just used the word for spit over and over because they said it's a Hindu country. So pray for Paul Talby. But he'll be at the summit. And he and his wife Amber will be at the summit. I think you would enjoy being with them. So plan on coming and being with us at the summit if you would.
Amen.
Okay, did I see
Okay, we have two questions. What would be some good books on starting a church that you'd recommend, or a specific place in the Bible to read and to focus on?
Well, I think in the Bible, I'd focus on the New Testament. Primarily the book of Acts, of course. Planning Churches Cross-Culturally by Hesselgrave is a great book that you should read. Can you think of any, Jeff?
Starting
I would
indigenous
look on
churches.
my computer, but if I type on my computer on the podcast, they'll hear every time I click a link. But what was you saying?
Starting indigenous churches.
See, Melvin Hodges has a book. Roland Allen has a book on indigenous churches. You definitely want to read those.
There's one, I think it's called Planning New Churches by Rick Martin. It's kind of a compilation that he did of a lot of different ones. Yeah, that's good.
Rick Martin's a missionary in the Philippines and a great guy, and I think you would enjoy reading his stuff. They've started hundreds of churches and been greatly used of God. But I'll see if I can't get the guys to put some books on church planning on the blog on worldevangelism.net. That'll be under this one when it comes out, Lord willing. All right. Did anybody else have a question or a comment? So we'd like to hear from you. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being with us. I hope you'll come and be at the summit. And I mean, that's really close. And for those of you that know Vision Baptist Church, you're members of the church, or one of our missionaries, or friends, and you're free, which I'm sure is not true, on Sunday morning, December the 25th, we are planning on having our grand opening service. Well, really not, but we are going to cut the ribbon and go in, and we'll dedicate the building in the month of January probably. But we should be moving in on that day. We'll be moving in before that. But anyway, so I thought maybe you might like to come and be with us if you could.
Amen. Brendan has one more question. When will the church planning manual be coming out from Vision?
Well, we have material I have put together that is just a compilation of books that's already available, but I don't sell it because it is nothing more than a compilation of chapters. But right now, the young people that help us at the church are doing this. They're doing this in these particular podcasts. They are transcribing them and editing them as a manual for what to do in the first 2 years you're on the mission field. And so that should be coming out pretty soon. All right. Well, I don't know anything else, Jeff, before we close down for today.
No, just want to ask you to join us on worldevangelism.net. You'll find a lot of good articles, a lot of good information, and obviously the archive of these podcasts. And jump on. And we've got, please come to the summit. We'd love to have you there. And we thank you very much for taking the time to join us here. And we look forward to the next one.
Brendan, when it becomes available, we'll sell you one at 5 times the normal price to make up for what we give away. But anyway, thank you. John O'Malley has come out with a book. He's a director, a great man, a friend of ours with Worldwide New Testament
Baptist Mission.
and it's on obstacles to your devotions, and he just did it in Spanish, and is even working on doing it in Audible in Spanish. And so I just challenge you to get a hold of that. Book. That'd be good. And thank all the men of God that listen and are with us. And thank you for being here today. And we will be back with you probably in about 10 minutes to do one more podcast today in English. And then possibly another one a little bit later when Robert gets here to talk to you about coming to the training center. But I thank you very much. And so this is God bless you, and we will see you later.